The party political conference season, as we know, has just finished, so now it's time to get down to reality and into business, which is what this Assembly is about. It's not about rhetoric, it's not about photo calls, and it's not about trying to give a public perception. It's about reality. Sometimes that reality hurts, and I'm going to start off by saying a piece of reality which is hurting at the present time. This Assembly is about evidence gathering. It's about finding solutions to complex problems. And the first thing I'd like to mention is the plight of their employed workers. There could be a debate on whether it's best that people with disabilities should work in a factory setting, or whether there should be a greater emphasis in terms of entering into an effective socially integrated workplace. That debate can take place. What is not in dispute is that 2,000 people are about to be thrown onto the scrap heap because of withdrawal of funding at very short notice. And that will be happening before an alternative, viable position is put in place for these people. The government, based on the SACE report, has said that their employed factories are non-economically viable because they're losing £68 million a year. But on the other hand, they can say that RBS is viable when it's losing £2 billion a year. It's not just about the economics of the madhouse I want to comment on, it's a reality. They say that they will put the money into the Access to Work Fund. They have very short memories. In 2008, 2,500 people lost their jobs in Remploy throughout the United Kingdom. In 2009, the GMB union surveyed those members who had lost their jobs. And in a year, only 5% of those people who had lost their jobs had found other employment in 2009. Of that 5%, half it again, the number of people who found jobs which were comparable, equal to or better than the job they had in Remploy. So based on evidence, which is what this Assembly is about, evidence, it's highly unlikely that a further 2,000 people from Remploy will find it easy to find a job in the current situation, given the fact we're in the midst of an economic recession. It just does not make any sense whatsoever. It's very unusual for an Assembly, but I'm going to ask you to show solidarity with our employed workers, and specifically to ask that the conference organisers write to those who are supporting Remploy, their unions, and also perhaps write to government bodies suggesting that this is not the way to go about it. There should be a meeting. There should be a meeting between the Remploy management, between the trade unions, between social enterprise organisations with experience of doing support for people, and there should be involvement of the business community, who are always lauded as being willing to step in to help to support people in terms of unemployment. We should ask them to put their money and their actions where their mouth is, and to come together and to have dialogue, withdraw the threat of funding from Remploy, and find a way of carrying on for those people. And I would ask you to show that solidarity by simply applauding. The most significant change in the last 12 months, of course, since the last Assembly, is the passage of the Welfare Reform Bill into an Act of Parliament. Reform. What is reform? According to the dictionary, reform is to put in a new and improved form or condition, to restore to a former good state, or to bring from good to bad. We are about evidence, so let's evaluate to see whether that meets the reform criteria. It's a mark of any civilised society that we care for those who are most in need, whatever form and shape that takes. We have always prided ourselves since the 1940s of having the welfare state. There are those who have never accepted the creation of the welfare state, who have always seen it as something which is in competition to them, which stops them from making obscene profits. And for the last 30 years, we have seen a sustained attack on the welfare state. That has risen continuously as governments have come and gone, regardless of their political hue. Inequality has grown and is evidenced to have grown under both Thatcher, Major, Blair and Brown. That is indisputable that inequality has risen. We have a situation where welfare has not been abandoned, however. What we have seen is a move towards harnessing the concept of welfare for private profit. We have the words of Lord Freud, the architect under the Labour government and then carried into the Conservative Liberal coalition government. We have his own words. He says that the welfare system is a multi-million-pound market. A market. He sees it as a cash cow and not as a safety net. This is where the evidence comes to us in terms of what the government's real agenda is from the mouths of the government itself. Successive governments have passed the blame increasingly onto individuals for their own plight. Welfare has been deliberately vilified. It's been made into a swear word. It's been made into a bad word, something which is not intended to be. And it's also saying that the public sector is not the best sector to be running welfare services. They say that there are those who are living on benefits who are content with a life in benefits. You can't be content in a life in benefits when Job Seekers Allowance gives you £65 a week. They try and draw a division between those in benefits and those in work. But how many people in work at the present time are suffering wage freezes? How many are finding suppressed wages? How many are having to work part-time? How many are giving up all their conditions? And of course, low pay is endemic within a lot of society. The government has taken the blame game to an entirely new level in the last year and before that. £18 billion to be shaved from the welfare system, while at the same time £25 billion in corporate tax breaks. To say that this country is poor is wrong. It's just that how we spend it is wrong. They emphasise benefit fraud as being £1 billion per year, but fail to tell us the £120 billion a year which is created through tax evasion, through avoidance and through non-collection. Nick Clegg, I have to quote this, I really have to quote this, the tycoon tax. He says, after he discovered that Mitt Romney, a United States presidential candidate, was only paying 13% tax on his total wealthy income, he says, you hope that that kind of thing doesn't go on in our country. Yeah? He says, I looked into it and I was shocked to find that our highest earners and our wealthiest corporations are not paying 20% tax. They are paying 20% tax. They're not paying 30, not paying 40, not paying 50. They're paying 20% tax. He then says, it makes it hard for people when you get up in the morning, you work really hard, you do the right thing, and then you discover that when you're paying your taxes, there are people who are apparently living in a different galaxy who are paying extraordinarily low rates of tax. Welcome to our world, Nick. We have known that for a very, very, very long time, and I look forward to the Chancellor's budget coming up in March, and I look forward to you giving them an ultimatum. Either give us a tycoon tax or we walk out on you. Put your money where your mouth is, Nick Clegg. But no area of welfare has come under such a sustained attack recently as those in disability. Let's deal with facts. They say that benefit fraud is endemic, and yet according to the Department of Work and Pensions, benefit fraud in totality comes to 0.5% of claimants. That's 14,500 people out of 2.9 million. If we were to apply the same logic of penalising entire swathes of people based on the minority of cheats, then we have to abolish Parliament. We do. We haven't yet forgotten the excesses of last year, although they seem to have conveniently forgotten it. Do we also abolish the banking system? No. What we do instead is we put in £850 billion of public money. Do we condemn all entrepreneurs because the likes of Emma Harrison, CBE and Chief Executive of A4E, rips off the state? No. The Prime Minister puts her in charge of working families everywhere, calls her inspirational and says she's a proven track record of turning things around. Well, she certainly can turn things around. She turned around £8.5 million into her own pocket off public funds. So this is the kind of society that has actually grown insidiously over the last 12 months. The definition of reform: to put into a new and improved form or condition, to have a former good state or bring about bad to good. There is no reform taking place. What we have is no restoration, no transformation. We simply have cost-cutting of an old system. I'm going to turn very specifically to the facts behind this through the Independent Resource Centre in the last 12 months. The IRC has dealt with as many inquiries in terms of debt over the last 9 months as we previously did in the 12 months of the other year, a 25% increase, with debts totalling somewhere in the region of £2 million in one local community. Multiply that through communities throughout the United Kingdom. The amount of unmanageable mortgage debt is already double the amount in the previous 12 months, around £1 million in a local community. The proportion of clients with debt problems who are homeowners, and I'm specifically saying homeowners to give the lie to the fact that everybody is actually in debt because they're not working and because they're living in benefits. Homeowners, 23% last year, this year 33% in terms of people coming with debt inquiries. The number of welfare rights inquiries is 10% more than the previous year. Incapacity benefit has gone out, and employment support allowance has come in. In terms of the two put together, we are dealing with 2.5 times more inquiries inside the last 12 months than in the previous year, a 32% increase in workload for staff. The new ESA system is generating an increase of 32% inquiries. However, when you translate that into monetary benefits for people, it's not generating 32% in terms of increased benefit. It's only generating 8%. The number of wrong decisions in terms of the initial assessments. Last year, the success rate of the Resource Centre in terms of appeals was 67%. On DLA alone was 61%. So badly wrong. So what did they do? They changed the goalposts. And this year, the appeals benefits are actually hitting about 20% for the same people with the same conditions who previously a year ago would have qualified. The government says that the most vulnerable will be protected under welfare reform. That's a lie, a blatant lie. And shockingly, I actually read what the Daily Mail's comment was in regard to the welfare reform. The Daily Mail says, we are led by a shameless government. It says there is a point when people will look back and shudder at the sheer callousness of what they have done. Not exactly left-wing radical newspaper, but the clarity of that statement is beyond debate. The evidence session which we're having on welfare will focus on alternatives to what we've got at the present time. Look into what an effective system would look like in the background of Scotland gaining more powers in the impending referendum. That could be independence, that could be Devil Max, it could be Devil Plus. But the one thing's a certainty: the status quo is not an option. We need change, and I think the people of Scotland know they want change and they want choices and they want to make choices. There's a move towards meaningful constitutional change about to come along. The welfare bill may be on the Westminster Statute Book, but we should perhaps discuss today, should it be on the Scottish Statute Book? Because we have the opportunity, given the fiscal autonomy and given responsibility for welfare in Scotland, matching the two together, we have the opportunity to shape what kind of society we want in this part of the United Kingdom. It's a mark of a civilised society to support people when they're in need. The referendum debate should not be allowed to deteriorate into mudslinging, personality contests, lies, and manipulation. In that debate, we have to raise the tone, and we have to say to those who are in favour of retaining the union and to those who are in favour of independence, what kind of society are you promising us? I don't go into Safeway supermarket and walk up to the checkout counter and say, fill the basket with anything you want. I make the choices what I want to put in that basket. And if I can't get the choices, I go and shop elsewhere. And we should take that same approach towards this referendum debate. If we're not happy with what we are being promised, we don't accept it. We want a welfare system which is worthy of the name. And if that means either through Devil Max or through the independence agenda that we have a Scottish Welfare Act for the Scottish people, then that's what we should argue for. Lessons have been learned through the passage of the welfare bill through Parliament. It's lessons we have to draw on in terms of creating an alternative. The Assembly, in conclusion, is about opportunities for dialogue, about networking, about people of like minds meeting up. We should use this opportunity in the next 2 days to think, to reflect, to discuss, to think the unthinkable, and to challenge party political representatives across the spectrum in terms of changing their approaches. We are the catalyst sparking off the debate and discussion about what kind of Scotland we want. And I'm pretty confident the kind of Scotland we don't want is one which is based on a Welfare Act, which the Daily Mail calls callous.
Danny, thank you very much for the introduction. In just 10 minutes, Danny has helped us to span the big picture on the legislation, all the way to the impact that's being felt at the moment in Clydebank and places like them all over Scotland and the UK. So thank you very much. And the theme of what do we mean by welfare reform and what the alternatives might be, I'm sure is one that will run throughout the 2 days. Thank you very much.